Keanu Reeves goes undercover as homeless in McDonald's. The shocking ending will blow your mind. Where are you watching this video from? Please comment and let us know. Also, don't forget to like the video and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Keanu Reeves was no stranger to the spotlight. Known worldwide as an action star and beloved for his roles in films like The Matrix and John Wick, his fame extended far beyond Hollywood. Yet, what truly set Keanu apart was his humility. Despite a fortune amassed through decades of hard work, he lived a modest life, riding the subway, chatting with fans, and giving generously to those in need. But beneath his composed demeanor was a burning curiosity about the human experience, especially for those less fortunate. Stories of the homeless had always tugged at his heartstrings. He often wondered, what would it feel like to walk in their shoes, to live without the safety net of fame and fortune? One evening, while scrolling through his phone in his cozy yet unassuming apartment, Keanu stumbled across a video of a homeless man sharing his life story. The man spoke about the stigma, the isolation, and the sheer willpower it took to survive each day. Moved to tears, Keanu resolved to do more than donate money or time. He wanted to understand their lives on a deeper level. And so, the idea was born. Keanu would temporarily shed his identity as a movie star and immerse himself in the life of the homeless. He decided to start in a place where he could observe a cross-section of society, a bustling McDonald's in downtown Los Angeles. Keanu's team was hesitant when he told them his plan. "What if someone recognizes you?" his assistant asked, worrying etched across her face. Keanu just smiled. "That's why it's called Undercover. Besides, it's not about me, it's about them." In the days that followed, Keanu prepared for his unconventional experiment. He grew out his beard, stopped shaving, and swapped his usual leather jacket for an old, tattered coat. A pair of second-hand boots, a net cap, and a scuffed backpack completed his transformation. As he glanced at himself in the mirror one last time, he barely recognized the man staring back. "It's not about looking homeless," he reminded himself. "It's about feeling what they feel." The sun was setting when Keanu made his way to the McDonald's. The bright neon arches stood in stark contrast to the dim, chaotic streets surrounding them. As he walked past bustling crowds and the occasional wary glance, he felt the first pangs of vulnerability. This is their reality every day, he thought. Taking a seat in a corner booth, Keanu began to observe. Families came and went, businesspeople grabbed quick meals, and teenagers laughed over fries. Yet, the homeless who wandered in were treated differently. They received skeptical stares, avoided eye contact, and were hurried out if they lingered too long. Keanu sat quietly, sipping a small coffee, listening to conversations, and blending into the background. For the first time in his life, he felt invisible. It wasn't the kind of anonymity he enjoyed while traveling, it was the kind that stung. This, Keanu realized, is why I needed to do this, to see the world from their eyes. And so, his journey began. Keanu Reeves stood in front of the mirror, hardly recognizing himself. His rugged disguise was complete. A scruffy, patchy beard covered his jawline. His hair was messy and unkempt, and his clothes looked worn, faded, and mismatched. The final touch was an old, weathered backpack he had, filled with crumpled newspapers and empty bottles, to mimic the belongings of someone without a home. "This will do," he muttered to himself, adjusting the knit cap that had a small hole near the edge. Stepping out into the world, Keanu felt a strange unease. Stripped of his identity, he wasn't an actor anymore, he was just another face in the crowd. The comforting buzz of admiration and recognition that often followed him was gone. He chose a McDonald's in downtown Los Angeles for his experiment, a place known for its mix of customers, working professionals, teenagers, families, and the occasional homeless individual seeking warmth or a meal. The golden arches glowed brightly in the evening haze, a beacon of familiarity amidst the chaos of the streets. Keanu shuffled toward the entrance, his head slightly bowed, doing his best to embody the demeanor of someone worn down by life. He hesitated for a moment at the door, watching people move in and out, some chatting cheerfully, others focused on their phones or meals. Once inside, he took a seat near the corner, clutching his backpack tightly. He had just enough coins in his pocket to buy a small coffee, which he sipped slowly to avoid drawing attention. The air smelled of French fries and freshly fried nuggets, a stark contrast to the musty scent of his borrowed coat. Keanu's mission was simple: blend in, observe, and interact. As the hours passed, he began to ask people for spare change. His first attempt was met with a dismissive wave from a sharply dressed businessman who didn't even make eye contact. A young couple looked at him nervously before mumbling, "Sorry, we don't have cash." But not everyone ignored him. A teenage girl with purple streaks in her hair hesitated when he asked. She rummaged through her backpack and handed him 2 quarters. "It's all I've got, man. Hope it helps." "Thank you," Keanu said softly, his voice thick with genuine gratitude. The simple gesture warmed him in a way he hadn't anticipated. An older woman, clearly struggling herself, approached his table with a small bag of fries. "Here," she said with a kind smile. "I got these extra. You take care now." Keanu was struck by the contrast in responses. Some people barely noticed him, while others, despite their own difficulties, showed kindness without hesitation. Toward the end of the night, a McDonald's employee, a young man in his early 20s, noticed Keanu sitting quietly in the corner. He approached with a cup of coffee and a cheeseburger. "This one's on me," the employee said with a shrug. "I see you've been here a while." Keanu accepted the food with a sincere smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." The employee pulled up a chair and began to talk. He shared stories of his own struggles, including how he worked double shifts to help support his family. "I know how tough it can get out there," he said. Keanu listened intently, absorbing the young man's story and the depth of his empathy. As the evening came to a close, Keanu stepped outside and sat on the curb, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time, he truly understood the isolation and resilience of those living on the margins. Every coin, every kind word, every small gesture mattered in ways he hadn't fully grasped before. But there was more to this. Experience, something profound, was taking shape in his mind. Keanu knew this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. Keanu sat outside the McDonald's, his coffee cup in hand, as people passed by. He continued to ask for spare change, his voice low and humble, careful not to make anyone feel pressured. The reactions varied widely. A group of young professionals walked by, deep in conversation about a recent work project. Keanu called out, "Spare some change," but none of them so much as glanced his way. Their laughter and chatter drowned out his words. As they disappeared into the restaurant, an older man in a crisp suit frowned slightly and hurried his pace as if Keanu's presence were a nuisance. The man clutched his briefcase tightly, muttering something under his breath that Keanu couldn't quite catch. It stung more than Keanu expected. He had known intellectually that many homeless individuals were invisible to society, but experiencing it firsthand was a different kind of pain. But then there were the small, unexpected acts of kindness that brought warmth to an otherwise cold night. A young woman carrying a sleeping toddler paused when Keanu asked her for change. She juggled her child in one arm while reaching into her purse with the other. Pulling out a crumpled dollar bill, she handed it to him with a tired smile. "It's not much, but I hope it helps," she said. Keanu's throat tightened. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Later, a middle-aged man wearing a delivery uniform stopped in his tracks, holding a nearly full bag of takeout. "Hey," the man said, looking Keanu up and down. "You hungry?" Keanu nodded, and the man handed over the bag without hesitation. "It's leftovers? I was gonna throw it out, but you can have it. Take care, brother." Keanu thanked him and held the bag close, not because he needed the food, but because the gesture reminded him of the humanity that still existed in the world. Not every encounter was positive. A group of teenagers loitering outside the McDonald's noticed Keanu and began laughing. One of them sneered, "Why don't you get a job instead of begging?" Keanu didn't respond, keeping his gaze steady. He'd prepared himself for reactions like these, but they still cut deeper than he anticipated. Another woman, impeccably dressed in a tailored coat and heels, gave him a look of disdain as she walked past. "Disgusting," she muttered loudly enough for him to hear. Keanu sighed and sipped his coffee, reminding himself why he was doing this: to understand, to feel, and to bear witness to what so many endured daily. As the night wore on, Keanu noticed the same McDonald's employee from earlier, the young man who had brought him a cheeseburger, cleaning tables near his corner booth. The employee approached him again, this time with a small paper bag. "Here," he said, placing it gently on the table. "It's not much, just a couple of apple pies. They're about to expire, so they'll probably just get thrown out anyway." Keanu smiled, grateful for the gesture. Thank you. You're really kind to do this. The employee shrugged, sitting down across from him. I know what it's like to struggle. My family didn't have much growing up. I've seen people on the street who just need a little break, you know. If I can help even a little, why not? Keanu nodded, deeply moved. What's your name? He asked. Marcus, the young man replied, leaning back in his chair. They talked for a while, Marcus sharing stories about his childhood and how he was saving up to go to community college. Keanu listened intently, struck by the young man's resilience and optimism despite his circumstances. You've got a good heart, Marcus, Keanu said after a long pause. Marcus smiled, then stood to resume his duties. Thanks, you take care, all right. As Marcus walked away, Keanu realized that this connection was precisely why he had embarked on this journey. It wasn't just about observing, it was about understanding the humanity behind the hardships. Keanu looked out the window at the bustling city beyond, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. For every act of cruelty or indifference, there were people like Marcus, the delivery man, and the young mother who proved that compassion still thrived in unexpected places. And this was only the beginning of what he would discover. Keanu had just finished his second cup of coffee when the door to the McDonald's swung open, and a young woman entered with a little boy by her side. She looked exhausted, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, dark circles under her eyes, and wearing a worn coat that barely fit her frame. The child, no older than 5, clutched her hand tightly, his eyes wide with curiosity. They moved toward the counter, and Keanu watched as she carefully counted out crumpled dollar bills and coins to pay for their meal, a small, happy meal and a coffee for herself. Once she had her tray, the pair sat at a table not far from him. The boy eagerly opened the Happy Meal box, his face lighting up as he pulled out the toy inside. The mother smiled faintly, sipping her coffee, her weariness momentarily overshadowed by the joy on her son's face. Keanu stood, brushing crumbs off his tattered coat. He approached the counter where Marcus was wiping down trays. Marcus, Keanu said softly. Marcus looked up, his expression curious but kind. Yeah. Keanu hesitated, then pulled off his net cap, running a hand through his hair. I need to tell you something. Before Marcus could respond, the mother and her son walked up, the little boy clutching his toy. She smiled at Keanu, recognizing him as the man she had offered apple slices to earlier. I want to thank you, Keanu began, addressing both of them, not just for your kindness tonight, but for reminding me of something important. The mother tilted her head, confused. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Keanu sighed and reached into his pocket, pulling out a pair of sunglasses he often wore in public. As he slipped them on, realization began to dawn on Marcus's face. No way, Marcus whispered, his eyes widening. The mother frowned, her brow furrowing in disbelief. Wait, are you? Keanu nodded, a small, humble smile spreading across his face. Yes, I'm Keanu Reeves. I've been here tonight not as myself, but to see what life is like for those who aren't as fortunate as I've been. For a moment, the small group was silent, processing the revelation. Marcus broke into a grin, shaking his head in disbelief. Man, I thought you looked familiar, but I figured there was no way. You were just sitting there, like anyone else. The mother looked at her son, who was too young to understand what was happening. Her face softened, and tears glistened in her eyes. You're serious? You're really him? Keanu nodded. I'm really him, and I meant what I said earlier. You've shown me more humanity tonight than I could have ever hoped for. The mother wiped at her eyes, her voice trembling. I can't believe this. I just did what anyone should do. I didn't know ... That's what makes it so special, Keanu said, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't know who I was. You didn't do it because of my name. You did it because you have a kind heart. Keanu turned to Marcus. You, too. The way you went out of your way to help me tonight, it meant everything. You reminded me of the goodness that exists in people, even when life isn't easy. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, his grin turning sheepish. Hey, man, I just try to do what feels right. But hearing that from you, that's wow, thank you. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, his grin turning sheepish. Hey, man, I just try to do what feels right. But hearing that from you, that's wow, thank you. Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope he had prepared earlier, just in case. He handed one to Marcus and another to the mother. What's this? She asked, her hands trembling as she took it. "Just a little something to say thank you," Keanu replied. "Open it when you're ready." Inside each envelope was a check, $50,000, for Marcus to fund his education and $100,000 for the mother to secure housing and a stable future for her son. The mother burst into tears, pulling her son close. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "This will change everything for us." Marcus stared at the check, his hands shaking. "Man, this is crazy. You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," Keanu said simply. "Tonight, you both gave me something money can't buy. It's the least I can do." As Keanu prepared to leave, the small group gathered around him, their gratitude filling the quiet restaurant. He paused at the door, looking back at Marcus, the mother, and her son. "You reminded me what it means to be human," Keanu said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Thank you for that." With that, he stepped out into the night, disappearing into the city lights, leaving behind not just financial support, but a profound sense of hope and inspiration for those who had touched his heart. After leaving the McDonald's, Keanu didn't disappear from their lives entirely. He had planned this final gesture long before revealing his identity. As he made his way down the street, his mind was still brimming with the faces of those he'd met, the lessons they had taught him, and the profound impact of their kindness. He wanted to do more for them, something that would truly change the course of their lives. Keanu didn't just leave behind a generous check. After his encounter with Marcus and the mother, he made discreet arrangements through his agent to ensure that both their futures were secured in ways far beyond what a single night could offer. For Marcus, Keanu arranged for a full scholarship to a local university, covering tuition, books, and living expenses. But that wasn't all. Keanu also worked with a few of his connections to help Marcus secure a stable job at a nearby tech company, where he could start an internship and, eventually, a full-time position once he graduated. As for the mother, Keanu didn't just help her pay for rent for a few months. He took the extraordinary step of securing an entire year's worth of housing. He also set up a college fund for her son, making sure that his education would be fully funded once the time came for him to attend. The money he had left her wasn't a one-time handout. It was the start of a new chapter in her life, one that was free from the overwhelming weight of financial struggle. Keanu set up a donation in both their names for a local charity dedicated to supporting single mothers and the homeless, an initiative he had personally helped to fund through his own foundations. His mission to help those in need wasn't just a moment of inspiration. It became a lifelong commitment. In the weeks that followed, Keanu gave several interviews, each one with a central message. He spoke openly about the experiment, his decision to go undercover as a homeless man, and how it had profoundly changed his perspective. But he wasn't just sharing his own story, he was using his newfound platform to advocate for greater empathy and support for the homeless. "I've seen firsthand how little kindness can go a long way," Keanu said during one emotional interview. "We often pass by those who are struggling, thinking they're invisible or unworthy of our time. But the truth is, we all have a part to play in lifting each other up. It doesn't matter how much you have, it's about how much you're willing to give. A smile, a conversation, or even just acknowledging someone's humanity can change their day or even their life." Keanu also donated millions to various charities focused on homelessness, mental health, and helping single mothers get back on their feet. Through his donations, a broader conversation about the importance of compassion in addressing societal issues began to spread, igniting a movement that inspired many to take action in their own communities. Despite the global attention Keanu's story received, he remained true to his humble nature. In the months that followed, he continued to perform acts of kindness, but he did so quietly, without fanfare, without needing recognition. Keanu could often be seen at local food banks, serving meals to those in need, or offering a few dollars to someone on the street who needed help. He spent time volunteering at shelters, speaking to people who had been affected by homelessness, listening to their stories with deep empathy. There was no camera crew to capture his acts. He was simply there, doing what felt right. One scene showed him walking into a small, bustling cafe on the outskirts of town, where a woman was struggling to carry heavy bags. Without hesitation, Keanu rushed to help, silently lifting the bags and carrying them to her car. She didn't recognize him, but he didn't care. What mattered was that he had shown her kindness, without any expectations in return. Another scene showed him at a local park, sitting quietly beside a man who had been homeless for years. They talked for hours, no cameras, no spotlight, just two people sharing a moment of human connection. Keanu blended seamlessly into the world, never needing to announce his generosity. His actions spoke louder than any interview or donation could. The message was clear. Kindness wasn't something that should be reserved for special occasions or celebrated in grand gestures. It was something that could be practiced every day by anyone in any situation. And in his quiet, unassuming way, Keanu Reeves showed the world just how much one person could do to change lives, simply by choosing to be kind. Keanu walking among the crowd, his face relaxed, his steps purposeful. He blended in with the people around him, not as a celebrity, but as a man who had learned what truly mattered. As he walked off into the distance, the voiceover from one of his interviews played softly in the background. In a world where we often feel disconnected, it's the small, quiet moments of kindness that can have the greatest impact. We all have the power to make a difference. We just need to take that first step.